on firms. Our Singapore business correspondent, Katie Silver, joins us. Hello, Katie.
Hi, Rod.
Now, funny to have you discuss, to explain to us this point of U.S. government influence. But I thought they were already challenging deals on the basis of national security. Have they gone further?
Yeah, they have. So, yes, as you say, there's already a lot of conversation around this, but I guess this actually puts into place and creates a framework with which they have to work with. So the parameters of this legislation is basically it's giving more power to what's known as the Committee of Foreign Investment in the US, or CFIUS. What it gives them the ability to do now is to veto, as you say, on national security issues. So, for example, primarily this will include sort of looking more at data and cybersecurity issues, whether or not, a business transaction may provide a foreign company or government with what they call material information. They also have now the power to block deals abroad, which they didn't have before. So joint ventures, things like that. And they're also going to strengthen export controls. So yes, as I say, it does widen their scope to do this.
It's a massive weapon then, isn't it? I mean, you could use it against a French company if they were going to try and do business in Iran, for example, or even business in China.
That's right. And China does, for the most part, seem to be the target of this new legislation. I mean, we speak every day about the national security concerns that Washington has when it comes to trading with Chinese companies such as ZTE, such as Huawei, such as China Mobile. And, I'll just give you a bit of a statement, for example. They say that any transaction that involves a country that seems to have demonstrated or declared a strategic goal of acquiring this critical technology or critical infrastructure, they're the ones that are going to be particularly targeted and particularly looked at here, Rod.
So does that give them the power to review deals that are already in force? I mean, part of the sort of the technology transfer deal that would be done by almost any American high-tech company with China.
Yes, well, and in terms of the deals that are already in place, for example, they're saying that for Huawei and ZTE, they've picked those two out as people or as companies rather, can no longer provide state services. So no government office can contract these two companies in order to provide things for them. And that comes back to these national security concerns. They worry that these companies are too close to China, to the Chinese government, and that therefore the infrastructure could be used for state espionage. But yes, it does sort of limit. We saw, for example, in the case of China Mobile, their recent bid was blocked to again try and enter the US. So it does make it more and more difficult for both companies that want to enter the US and companies that are already there.
And is there an actual office of the US government that is responsible for making these determinations?
Yes, this is the Committee of Foreign Investment in the US. So they're the ones who are going to be spearheading it, and they're the ones whose powers have been really greatly increased by this. And what we're seeing it, in different countries around the world. The UK, for instance, just last month announced that they were going to be looking into foreign takeovers more and more, particularly when it comes to cyber threats, because they want to ramp up this crackdown on potential foreign influence.
So what kind of reaction is this provoking? I mean, in places like South Korea, for example, let alone China.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess it creates tremors across the board. I mean, we've seen, in terms of reaction, we've seen the Chinese Commerce Ministry today say that they're going to comprehensively assess the contents of this bill and that they want fair treatment. I guess that's one of the major concerns, but it does widen this issue that is, a global issue around whether, the national security and how business can be influenced by that. We've seen Germany, France, Australia, for instance. Huawei was recently banned from having any involvement in the 5G network in Australia. So we're seeing a widening of this stance, really.
So really, at base, I mean, something like Huawei is you don't want a Chinese company having intimate access to your national telephone system.
That's right. One of the major concerns when it came to Australia was the ability to listen in on conversations. And this was, again, why China Mobile was blocked from, they've been trying to enter the US since 2011. And again, they said that they're too close to the Chinese government. And exactly, if you have them if you have them implementing your critical infrastructure, you have no way of controlling it. When it comes to ZTE, I mean, there's more concerns as well in terms of the stealing of US intellectual property. That was one of the both in terms of, there was two major concerns. First of all was that they were doing illegal trade despite the US having sanctions against Iran and North Korea. But then the other issue is the stealing of US chip technology here, Rod.
Which, of course, people in Silicon Valley have been complaining about for nigh on 20 years. Is this seen as you know, a little bit too late? If the US was going to do this, why have they done it now, and why didn't they do it in 2001?
Well, you're right. I mean, if we look at the UK in that sense, they had, in 2002, they implemented this legislation about foreign takeovers of firms, but it was only firms that made up to more than $70 million in revenue, or £70 million rather. So, I mean, it is late to the game, but the issue of cyber warfare and cybersecurity in these contexts is growing in people's awareness. And we're seeing even split division, for example, in Washington about whether or not what level of crackdown is necessary. President Trump, for instance, has backflipped on going from being quite a harsh critic of ZTE in terms of this national security threat, backflipping to now sort of supporting them more in recent months and supporting their bid to re-enter the US after the ban against them really crippled them.
Katie, many thanks indeed.
Thanks a lot, Rod.